You are now tuned in to the Cosmic Convos podcast, your number one source for accurate, relevant, and thought-provoking astrological conversations in the podcast nation, the place where stars and minds align.
Peace. You're now tuned into the Cosmic Convos podcast. I'm your humbled host, Herut, and I got the good brother Ra. How you doing?
Peace, King. Can't be better right now, brother. Can't be better.
Sounds good, man. So, and here we are, man. We're on, episode 6. Last episode did pretty good, man. A lot of fanfare, with it. A lot of people, a lot of stuff going on in those two charts kind of resonated with a lot of people, especially women. How you feel about that show?
That show was an excellent show, King. Definitely showed the power of astrology, and we can see how destiny aligns us with, whether it be, wealth, health, marriage, divorce, whatever comes our way, what we say is Seker or destiny is definitely has it in store for us. So I definitely feel that was a great show, brother.
Yeah, man. And before we get too far, let me remind you this show is brought to you by Push It Forward Media Group and Calipurusha Astrology. You can find Push It Forward Media Group on Instagram at Push It Forward. That's PUSHITFWD. And you can find Calipurusha. How do you find Calipurusha, Brother Ra?
You can find me on Calipurusha on YouTube. You can get at me there. You can also find me at Shechem Ra on either IG or Facebook. Either one of those should be the same name. So if you're interested in any type of charts or just have a basic conversation about the shows, hit me up.
Indeed. And you can find Push It Forward at pushitforward.com as well. Spelled just like the Instagram, PUSHITFWD.com. All right. So, springboarding off of last week's show, we got a couple of questions / comments coming up. One thing, one of our listeners did correct us. I said that Tupac was actually born in prison, but he wasn't born in prison. His mother, Feenie, was pregnant with him in prison. So that's my mistake on that one. All right. Thanks for pointing that out, brother. And we have a question here. Brother wanted to know, what is our thoughts on astrophotography?
Astrophotography is a very powerful aspect and facet of astrology. And, that's why I kind of say that you can take different pieces and different parts of astrology from various schools and use them with the right sidereal placements, and it reveals some very phenomenal results. I've used astrophotography a few times, and it's not very hard to do. You put the information in, it gives you the placements with regards to the planets that are lined up with certain meridians or certain areas of a country or parts of the world. And I can say per my own personal testimony that astrophotography is a science that if you use it properly, it can give you some deep results. I know my power lines across the United States are a trip. For example, Saturn rules my house of children, and phenomenally so. My son is in California, in Oakland, California, or well, California, Sacramento, really, but same general area where my Saturn line falls right on. So, I mean, you can't get any better than that, right? I mean, when your child is located right at where your Saturn line is, and Saturn rules your children, right? I mean, you can't, that's pretty powerful. And there's other things that I've seen with regards to my own personal life, traveling to different places. I've noticed how the people vibe with me in certain areas, and it's like, wow, I definitely can do some things here with regards to that energy. So astrophotography, like I said, if it's used properly, and again, you don't want to use the tropical information, you want to use the sidereal, and the sidereal will really blow you away. So anybody that's interested in that, definitely use it with the sidereal placements, and you will not regret that as an investment as far as your time and money.
Good deal. Appreciate that. So I guess now, we ready to go ahead and, get into today's show. We got another good one, and this one is also, inspired, by, one of our listeners. So, we definitely, appreciate the input, and as you can see, if you ask it, we'll address it. You got suggestions, we'll always consider it. So we really appreciate you guys listening, and we also appreciate your feedback. All right. So, with that being said, we're going to get into that. One of our favorite topics to get into in this show is mundane astrology. And, one of our listeners suggested that we do an African country. And one of the countries that we happen to have, good birth data on was Liberia. So we're going to, get into the history and the current the current situations and past situations of the country of Liberia. So, I'm gonna let Brother Rock go ahead and take it over for a second and, get into kind of the background and the beginnings of the country.
No doubt. Yeah. Listeners out there, again, we appreciate you. We appreciate you listening, giving us feedback, giving us topics that you want us to delve into. So this is one for the people. This is definitely one that has been quite an eye opener with regards to the research that it engendered. So, one of the things that you do when you look at mundane astrology is you want to look at a lot of the surrounding factors of the birth of a nation, and no pun intended, right? When you look at the beginnings of how a country, even a city or a state, or even a human being for that matter, you want to look at the surrounding energies that birth that thing. And Liberia is a strange, when I say strange, it's not a typical way that a country is founded with regards to the intent for the nation. Now, again, I'm not here, and Cosmic Convos not here to take sides. This is just raw data, raw information. Of course, there's always hidden aspects, hidden principles, hidden things that are underneath the manifestation of things. But for the most part, astrology will show you what it is that you're dealing with regards to whatever it is that's being viewed. And so Liberia is founded in in the 1800s, and the founding of the country is really so it was quote unquote for so that blacks, ex or former slaves, would have a chance for freedom, right? And it was deemed by a group, and we'll talk about the name of that group here shortly, that blacks would be better off in their own native land, right? And so the child of America, right, is, for all intents and purposes, what Liberia is. It's a product of America. And, you could say made in the USA, right? Right. Or made by the USA, rather. But, the country, the name of it really holds a lot of information. The name, a name is like a symbol. It shows what it is that is the intent for the country. And in fact, in Kemet, right, in ancient Egypt, the Ren, or the name, is a very fundamental part or aspect of the spirit, right?
Yeah.
So a name holds a lot. And Liberia, right, really comes from the word liberty, right? And there's a quote on the presidential standard for Liberia that says, "The love of liberty brought us here," right? So, you really kind of have to take a look at that and step back and ask, well, what does that have to do with astrology? How does that fit in with astrology? How could we see that in the chart? And, well, you really, the ascendant, which is the first house, the rising, right? It's also called a lagna, is Libra. And Libra, right? Libra, librarian, liberty. All of them have a very close connotation with regards to freedom. And in fact, and this is not aligned to the chart per se, but when you have an ascendant, you have to take all three of the what we call nakshatras or asterisms into consideration with regards to a sign. And one portion of Libra is called Swati, and it is a shortened version of the name of Saraswati. And Saraswati is the goddess of learning and the arts, also akin to Shushat in ancient Egypt or Kemet. Mm-hmm. So, liberty, the Statue of Liberty and all those things, right? The Statue of Liberty holds a book and a flame, or the flame of enlightenment, and the book, meaning literally a book, which gives you insight, knowledge, and literally what frees you. Knowledge is what frees you. So, those deeper meanings to the country's name shows a direct connection to the ascendant and the imports that it has to do with as far as astrological principles are concerned. Those beginnings is all about liberty. Those beginnings are all about being able to emancipate someone from a state of servitude to a state of being able to self-govern themselves. So that's the first piece, right? And pretty powerful.
And indeed. But before we go further, could you get into what's the actual date of birth for Liberia that you have right here?
Yeah, I show July 26th, 1847 is the actual date of birth for that country. And it's phenomenal that, it's pretty close to America's birth date, right? It's not far off, talking 3 weeks at best. So, America's chart is very different. But here's the other phenomenal thing about it, too, and that America's chart is a Sagittarius ascendant, and that will be a show that we will do at some point in the near future. But Jupiter, Sagittarius ascendant, if you count 11 away from Sag, you end up with Libra, right?
Yeah.
And the 11th house are your allies, right? Mm-hmm. So with Libra being the ascendant of Liberia, shows a direct connection to the chart of America as a friend. Right. So again, these things, you can't make them up. It's not like this is not fudged. This is straight out raw data, right?
Maybe even a friend of me,
So,
that term that they use.
right, definitely. Well, looking at America's chart, you understand why when you get into those imports, right? You definitely see why America's a frenemy to many countries. But the other thing I want to touch on, you look at the flag of a nation, and the flag of a nation kind of is a symbol. It shows you kind of what their agenda is and what they kind of align themselves with. And the flag of Liberia is almost identical to the United States.
Yep.
With one difference. The only difference is that where the blue background resides, there is 1 star versus 50. But the red and the white stripes are identical. So that's a big symbol as well to show that this country is, again, an offshoot of the United States of America. It's one of Africa's first republic to claim independence. So that's a big piece as well. Again, independence, freedom, liberty, Libra, right?
Yeah.
All fits perfectly. I think we're at 2 for 2 right now,
yeah.
right?
Yep.
So, you can knock them down, and we're going to keep going as well. During the American Civil War, in fact, America didn't even recognize Liberia. Well, some countries didn't recognize Liberia as a legitimate country until after the Civil War.
Yeah.
But a lot of people were, transported to Liberia with the intents that, hopefully this would be something that would be a quote unquote promise kept by America, right? The other thing that I want to talk about is the actual outlay of the chart and some of the key principles behind how they're situated. And when you look at a country, you always want to, or any person, you always want to look at how the dashas start. And dashas, I may have mentioned in the past, what I call them, Dasha is a Hindu or Indian word that it means, Dasha means 10, right? But it also, what I like to say is it's really like your life chapters, the chapters of a person or a nation's or a thing's life, how it starts, how it begins, and how it ends. What are the different pieces of the puzzle that kind of fit into that person's life and how you read it as a book. Right? Yeah. We all have a book of life. Well, your book of life is your chart, right? So it starts off in a Venus Dasha period. So phenomenally, right, it starts off with the ruler of the ascendant as the Dasha period, which that doesn't happen too often. And so Venus ruling the ascendant, right, it goes to a specific placement in a specific house. The house is really where we look to see the activity or, the undergirding structure of what happens. And the 11th house is where the ascendant lord goes, right? So, we say, how was it founded? Like, what was the beginnings of this nation? And the 11th house is the house of allies, as I mentioned with America. It's the same thing for Liberia.
Yeah.
It is the house of friends. Anybody's chart is the house of your friends. I'm talking about real friends, like people that are there for the long haul, not, acquaintances or people that you meet, in passing, but real friends, people that are there like your elder brothers as well is also the 11th house. Big brother, right?
Interesting.
Big sister, isn't it, right? Yeah. And the group, as I mentioned originally, there's a group that founded, that was the instrument, so-called, to create Liberia, and that was the American Colonization Society. Right. Now we know what colonization is, of course, but I'm saying the facts remain, not getting into the personal purview of what colonization is, because we know, most people know what it is for all intents and purposes. But cooperative societies is also the 11th house, right? So it's phenomenal that cooperative societies is directly aligned with the beginning of this nation, right? I mean, the name of the group is, again, American Colonization Society, right? So, perfect fit. We're 3 for 3, right? It fits right over like a hand in glove, right? It's also talks about reforms for benefiting the public, right? Again, trying to so-called assist the slaves and the prisoners of war that were in this nation that were Africans. So, that's the first jump off, right there, right? The second piece is, and that's just the Dasha period as it starts. But looking deeper into the chart, and I just want to touch on that when you look at the beginning of a chart or looking at a chart itself, you want to look at the beginnings, look at where that first period starts. Because if the period is rough, sometimes the life kind of goes that way. If the period is solid, the life kind of goes away. Not always, because as we'll see here, that the beginnings were very different from how it is now, right? So the next piece of the puzzle is that we look at the sun as the ruling body of a nation, the governing body of a nation, and it's phenomenal that the sun rules the 11th house for Libra ascendant, right? Well, again, the 11th house deals with those allies, those the agreements with foreign powers of government, and the 11th lord, which is the sun, goes to the 10th house of power, right? So also showing the instrument and design that America had in mind when they were setting up this country, that they would have a leg into Africa as well.
Yep.
Very, very, very important to know that. So, when you look at a country, you look at the sun, look at where the sun is placed, look at how the sun is situated. When you find the sun and you see, okay, sun is in the 12th house, sun is in the 2nd house, those are going to be specific messages about the country and how that governing body, whether it be the president, the king, the parliament, the prime ministers, all those people, how they're going to rule, where they're going to rule from, and what would be the ultimate demise of those people as well. So that's another piece, right? And going deeper within the chart itself, the country has some serious turmoil, right? Has from the beginning. In fact, a lot of the natives of that land were very resistant to America stepping foot in and setting up this colony, right? So that former slaves or ex-slaves would have some place to be free, right? So there was already strife from the beginning. But that is really aligned with Mars in the 7th house, right? And Mars in the 7th house, and Mars is in its own sign, right, in Aries. So, the 7th house is like opposition, right? I know it's the house of marriage in regards to in regards to natal astrology, right? But it's really also the house of war in a way, right? It's your open enemy. It's the people that are opposing you or in the opposite seat from you. Now, marriage, they always kind of say that all is fair in love and war, right? And that's the person that's next to you in your bed, usually, if there's a problem, is the person that can destroy you very quickly in natal charts, that is. So, expanding it to a global or mass level in a mundane chart, the 7th house is not just, who you make deals with, but also who really is against you. And so the 7th house having having Mars in it shows that when these people begin to set up shop, there were some people that pushed back, right?
Yeah.
Right. And this pushback has been there from the beginning, right? This resistance has been there from the beginning. And you can see how it's unfolded all the way up into something we're going to talk about here shortly, as far as not the infrastructure, but the uncomfortability of the people and how things are being run, right? The other thing is looking at the moon looking at the moon in a natal chart shows you the mindset and the feel of the people, right? It shows you how the people kind of, what they think and feel about this whole thing we call a nation. And the moon in this chart is in the third house, right? And so the moon in the third house, you kind of want to look at the moon in relation to the sun, right? Because the sun is going to show you government and the moon is going to show you the people. And you want to say, well, hey, are the people set up well with the government? Do they agree with the government? Do they have disagreements with the government? Are they in bed with the government? That kind of thing. And so looking at the sun in the 10th house, if we count from the 10th to the 3rd, that's 6 houses away. So guess what? The people never vibe with the government, right? The people never agree with the government. The people never go with the flow with regards to being ruled by the powers that be. And so as we move in deeper, we're going to see what happens when certain periods, certain life chapters turn on, to see what happens and how those people deal with the government, right? So, the other thing is you look at the infrastructure of a country, right, to kind of do a comparison. You got any questions so far, brother? Are you good, or how are you feeling?
Feeling pretty good. I think, did you just say that the sun was 6 houses from the moon, or?
Well, the moon is 6 houses from the sun. The sun is 8 houses from the moon. So it's what's called a 6-8 combination, right? In Western or Hellenistic astrology, that's what really Western astrology is Hellenistic astrology, Greek astrology. Yeah. And they do have some very powerful things to offer. I mean, I'm not saying that all of their stuff is if they just switched to sidereal, the conversation would be over, right? Yeah. For the most part, right? But because they lock themselves into a time scale that, for all intents and purposes, is 2,000 years old, then we have a big difference when we come to agreeing on the ability to predict. But anyway, it's called a quincunx, right? 6-8, right? And 6-8 is like a fighter stance, right? So when you fight, I don't know when you was a kid, like, man, let's square up. You never square up when you fight. Yeah. You fight from an angle, right? You slide into it, right? You don't stand square toe to toe. The only time you toe to toe is when you begin the boxing round, but after that, you see them pretty much moving to get the right angle, to get the right hit. So that's a 6-8 combination. Yeah. And so moon is 6 from the sun, and sun is 8 from the moon. And so when you have that, again, that creates a dissonance, right, rather than a resonance. It's regarding the people, their mindset, and the government and how they rule. So, when you look at a country, you want to look at the infrastructure of a country to see if you can see, well, how does this fit? How does this work out? Does it work well? And when I say infrastructure, we'll give an example. Education isn't part of the infrastructure of a nation. You want to look to the 4th house for the base of education, right? The 5th house as well, because the 5th house rules the boards of education, right? Rules higher learning with regards to education, meaning that the country, how does it filter education down to the people at large, meaning the children specifically, right? Does the country involve the children in education, which is the 5th house? And the 4th house is ruled by Saturn. So, if it rules that sign, you kind of have to, that rules that house, you kind of have to say, well, do I see a very healthy educational base in the country? And it's not the worst it could be, but it definitely is not the best, right? And so the fourth lord goes to the fifth house. Of like I said, of children. So the literacy rate in Liberia is 60%. Women are slightly under men, by a hair's length, but for the most part, it's about 60%, and that's not that bad considering some other countries. It's not the best. Zimbabwe is the best with 90% education or literacy rate with regard to the country, but again, they still have many problems as well, even though they're fairly literate with regards to the African nations. But considering we're talking about 6 out of 10 people are educated. The dominant language there is English, right? So, considering, it's not as bad as it could be. And again, there shows that Saturn in the fifth house ruling the fourth, it shows that. It shows that it could be better. Saturn, even though it's in its own sign, is still very a disparaging space between those that are educated and those that are, you can say really half if you boil it down.
Yeah.
Are and half aren't. So it shows that in the chart without a doubt. Right. I want to go back just to a point that I mentioned earlier, in that Mars in the seventh house shows that that strife that is the undergirding feel of the country. Well, Pluto. And we can talk about the outer planets when we deal with mundane, because this country is, over 100 years old. So we can talk about that because these cycles, the countries will actually at some point hit the larger cycles that these outer planets will yield, that these outer planets cover. And so Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto can be discussed in light of these types of astrological underpinnings. Now, you can't do that per se with natal astrology. It's very hard to do. You have to, like I said before, have a very tight aspect within a degree. I always say within a degree. I give a window of 3, sometimes 5, depending on the chart itself. But if it's a degree's length away from a planet, then you can pretty much say there's going to be some subtle impacts there. But with a nation's chart, it's there without a doubt. Yeah. And so Pluto is within 2 degrees. Pluto's at 5 degrees. Mars is at 3 degrees. Aries. Yeah, that's heavy, because you can't really get, away from the fact that Pluto, which is kind of like 8th house stuff, sudden events, explosions, things that cause disarray, things that cause something to be weakened and dissolved, right? It's in the 7th house with the 7th lord looking at the 1st house. So there's always this uneasiness with regards to the country. There's always something that is boiling behind the scenes, if you will. Some plot, schemes, spies, things like that. That's what Pluto really brings.
A lot of plutonic relationships with Liberia.
Yeah, plutonic, all right. Plutonium-like relationships, right? Explosive, right? So, that definitely is there to show, again, when we look at Liberia, why there's so much tumultuousness there, for lack of better words. So, moving deeper in, when we talk about this, we really can talk about the infrastructure with regards to the railway, the transportation system, if you will. And it's kind of hard to see at first, because you would think that the moon would do well in a third with regards, because the people would really want, the people would be invested in the transportation system. And again, remember, the sun is 8 houses 6 houses away from the 3rd. So then that shows that the government isn't so keen on helping set these things up, right?
Yeah.
And the 3rd lord, Jupiter, which rules Sagittarius, is in, it's what's called detriment, and that's another Hellenistic term, right? It's in its detriment, meaning it's in the sign opposite to its natural ruler or natural place that it governs, right? So the ruler is in its opposite sign. It's in Gemini in the 9th.
Yeah.
And so that shows that it's detrimental, just like the word sounds like. It's not, it's 50-50, right? It's kind of like darned if you do, darned if you don't, right? Type deal with regards to the transportation system. Well, Liberia is right on the water, right? It has a port. And the majority of the transportation, that when I say transportation, but the majority of the movement with regards to transportation is through that port. Right. So I would imagine that port is really the place where a lot of traffic is involved. Right. But with regards to the roads, it's not that great. Right. If I'm correct, historically, an audience is more than welcome to correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm correct on this point, in that Goodyear had set up at some point, the Goodyear company, as far as tires and rubber, had set up shop there. You would think that if Goodyear sets up shop in a country, I mean, it's going to have transportation, but it doesn't, right? And that's why I say it's a 50-50 kind of love-hate relationship with regards to the transportation. You look in and you see the infrastructure needs a lot of work. The roads are damaged from the rains, right? It's very wet in Liberia, right? It constantly rains. It's in a zone that, gets a lot of rain. So, wars have definitely damaged the roads and the infrastructure, right? And we're going to talk about those wars here in just a few minutes. Those wars have damaged the roads as well. So again, at some point, I'm sure it was a lot better than it is today, but it's definitely on the decline with regards to the infrastructure around transportation. So we've talked about education. We've talked about transportation. So the next piece I want to talk about is Rahu in the 12th, right? And Rahu in the 12th is very telling, right, about a nation. It really talks about political plots against the ruler and the governing party. It talks about revolts, riots, foreign invasions, right? And in 1980, there was a coup, right? And I believe the actual date is April 12th, 1980, right? On that date, in fact, right, there's some pretty pertinent information we would want to look at with regards to how that day happened, what happened on that day. On that day, with regards to transits, right, the sun was at 29 degrees Pisces. Now, that's a Gandanta point. And a Gandanta point, what it is basically, it's when it's between water and fire signs. The first degree on either side of the sign, 29 degrees Pisces, 1 degrees Aries, 29 degrees Cancer, 1 degrees Leo, and same thing with Scorpio and Sag. Those degrees are called Gandanta zones. Those are where things become overwhelming. It's literally, Gandanta means to drown, right? And when you're drowned, and it's say sometimes it can be literal if it's in a person's chart, but many times it's not literal. It just means you're overwhelmed, right? And the sun ruling the government is overwhelmed, right? On that day, and in the natal chart of Liberia, Uranus is at 26 degrees Pisces. So we've got a sun that just passed Uranus. Uranus creates revolts, upheaval, sudden events, right? These outer planets are very powerful planets because they are not ones that just let things stay status quo. They are about change on a grand scale. Well, it just passes. It's at 29. The sun is at 29 degrees Pisces in the Gandanta zone, passes Uranus, right? Is about to enter into the seventh house. And right when it's about to enter in the seventh house, is going to meet Mars at 3 degrees and Pluto at 5 degrees. So it's like in this sandwiched place, right? With all of these powerful subvertive energies that really blow things up, right? So, on that day, there's some definite serious energies with regards to the chart itself, right? You can't get any better than that with regards to showing how this is the time where a coup or a revolt happens. Now, back to Rahu in the 12th. Rahu in the 12th shows again, right, those political plots. And if I'm correct here, Samuel Doe, right, is one of the individuals that was instrumental in an individual by the name of Samuel Doe was part of the army of the nation. He was instrumental in taking down the government, right, that was in place. And so Rahu in the 12th shows, right, foreign powers that aid in undermining a country, right? And President William Tolbert Jr., right, was killed and shot purportedly by a white CIA agent.
Wow.
So this definitely rings true when you show that Rahu is in the 12th house. That country overall is always going to have someone in the backdrop trying to manipulate the government. Right. Now, back to life chapters. And this is to show this exactness of this particular chart, that the moon dasha, the moon life chapter, begins March of 1980. So within a month's time, right? And remember, said the moon is 6/8 to the sun. The moon dasha, the people are dissatisfied. The people are frustrated. The people want change. 6/8, right? The moon dasha begins the shift of the powers that be. They take the guy out, right? Can't get any better. Now we're at 5 for 5, 6 for 6, I believe, right?
Something like that.
Who's counting, right?
Yeah.
Right? Right. So, this is to show that this is how you begin to look at a nation with regards to mundane astrology and how you can see it as it fits perfectly, right? The other thing I want to talk about is that there's a second civil war that happens, right? Now, this is the first civil war. So this 1980 is when the first civil war ensued, right? And then the second civil war begins in 1999. Now, here's the thing. Remember, we talked about Rahu in the 12th. So Rahu's period, the Northern Node's period, begins in 1997. So in 1999, here comes another shift of power, right? Another shift of power. And, it's phenomenal. Rahu shows that, again, something is coming at this time to dissolve, right, the government and the structures that are in place.
Yeah.
You can't get any better than that.
Yeah.
You can't get any better than that. I know there's been some conjecture about, some things that were said by, it was a Vice, that created a whole series about, some very unsettling things. But
yeah,
when you understand that Rahu being in the 12th house kind of still has that ominous feel to it, when there's always something or someone in the background waiting to, slide into power. But the other piece is that Rahu's in the 12th house And the 12th house deals with some serious things, because the other thing is that Ketu is also in the 6th house simultaneously.
Yeah.
Right? The 6th house rules disease. Right? The 6th house rules illness, imbalances, debt. Right? I say debt, not in just in the sense of terms of monetary debt, but karmic debt. Right? Debt. Any kind of thing that you owe, you got to pay up. Right? Because of any imbalances that you might have dealt with, it's going to come out of that 6th house. And it's manifested in the 12th. Right? Vice versa. Well, the 12th house is hospitalization. Well, okay, hospitals are horrible in Liberia. I mean, I don't think anyone would disagree with that. What about you, Atta? What do you think about that?
I'm not trying to get patched up out there. No disrespect, but
Yeah, they're not all that great, right? But also it rules quarantines, right? 12th house is isolation, right? And Rahu in that period, in that Dasha life chapter period, right around 2014, when the period is just about to come to an end and switch over, what breaks out?
Ebola,
right? Now there's some reports that, powers that be put the Ebola in place. I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't doubt it. However, whether it was placed, whether it was bushmeat, whatever it is, right? Right. Whatever it is, right? It happened, right? It was an event that took place. And Rahu being in the 12th caused that quarantining process. Do you remember that, brother? Remember that?
Yeah, absolutely.
That was big. I mean, they were quarantined. You couldn't leave or go, right, from that country. That's quarantine. That's 12th house stuff, right? It ensued until 2015. And here again, phenomenal stuff, y'all. Jupiter Dasha begins in 2015. So within that year, that bridge from Rahu to Jupiter, and Rahu Mars is the last period. It's the last Dasha sub-period, right? Mars is in the 7th house, rules the 2nd and 7th, and is in 6 houses away from Rahu. So we got that 6th house import of disease, illness, and imbalance again. So again, you receive the theme repeat. Jupiter's in the 9th house, right? So Jupiter then comes in and then removes or dissolves, right, the epidemic. So by and far, I mean, I think we've substantiated that, this is Liberia's horoscope,
Absolutely.
What would you say, brother? Would you say you think we're good on that one?
We are. I think we hit, all the main kind of, perceptions that people have of Liberia. I mean, that Rahu sitting there in the 12th house is big.
It is. It's major. When we do it America, when we get into America's chart at some point in the future, we're going to see how those placements are set up and what it does in this particular regard in regards to the United States. You're going to see how these things work, and you can see it over and over and over like a clock. If you look up at a clock and it's 4:30, it's 4:30, right? We don't have to argue that, right? That's an objective standpoint. We are doing things in an objective way to really nail in the realities that astrology is by and far a science that can not only predict, but look back in time to give you insight into things that have happened and, like we said, will happen.
Indeed. Yeah, so I think that we pretty much sliced that one up, and man, we beat our time this time.
Indeed.
Yeah. So, Brother Rod, you got any closing statements or anything that you want to, any announcements or anything like that you want to get out?
Not at this time, not any particular announcements, just, I appreciate everybody for listening and for tuning in. This is going to be ongoing as long as we can, as far as, getting the information out to the people. Hopefully the people will get out, research, take a look, start looking up, start looking around to see, hey, astrology is a real deal. It's gotten a bad rap. And I would say it's gotten a bad rap because of the misnomer or the misinformation that Western astrology has produced with regards to their timing and their placements. But if you look a little deeper, the nations that rule the world have always used this to control the world. So that's why it's important for us to keep our ear to the street and eyes to the sky, so we can use this and really navigate reality.
Indeed. One thing I did want to say before we close out is that we're working on putting something together. We got some kind of giveaway or something like that we're working on. So stay tuned on that. Stay tuned to that and whatnot. Let me see what else. We're going to we got our next show is going to be pretty interesting indeed. And probably in that next show is when we'll announce the giveaway that we got coming. So stay tuned for that. And if you got some suggestions, something that you specifically are looking for, let us know, and we'll definitely take that in consideration. But you got to get it in quick, all right? Because we're going to announce it next week. And one more thing, stay tuned into Kalapurusha Astrology. You have a video that you got coming up, right?
Yeah, it's gonna actually be timed, with some things that we're doing on the back end here. So yeah, definitely keep looking. I know it's slow coming, but everything you get from us is worth waiting for. Anything that's done in quality, it takes time. And I like to do things in a very thorough way so that it leaves very little wiggle room for error, if you know what I mean.
Indeed, and stay tuned. Be on the lookout for what's going on at Push It Forward. We got some short films in the making, that we're going to be releasing pretty soon that I think everybody will definitely enjoy. So stay tuned to that. I'll definitely let you know when those will be dropping. Pretty much with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed this show. Remember to, like and, subscribe to, our podcast on, whichever platform you're looking, that you're listening on, and share it with people, let people know, we're going to keep cranking out these shows. And, I thank you all for the consistency. We've, looked like we've developed a good core, kind of following, for this show. So we really appreciate that. And we want to grow it. We want to take it to the next level, because we don't just do this just because, we want to, be popular or something like that and have a good, just a podcast for the sake of having a podcast. I believe we both have a genuine interest in, trying to expose, people, to this form of astrology, because we've both been able to leverage it throughout our lives and, get some great results. And, we want you to get those type of results as well, So, with that being said, I think we're good here, and, we'll see you next show. Brother Rod, you good? You got anything else you want to say?
No, brother, you've said it all. Perfect.
All right, good deal. Well, until next time, peace.
Peace.